Hi, I'm Ross Jacobs. I'm going to do a series of 2 or 3 videos on lunging. The star of the video you can see in the background there is my horses are Six and Riley, and I'll be using Six in the later videos to demonstrate some of the aspects of lunging that I want to talk about. But in this first video, I mainly want to focus on the very basics. So nearly everybody lunges their horses at some point, no matter what the discipline. And everybody has their own idea of what they're intending to achieve by lunging, what is correct, what's not correct, the equipment they like to use. And it's become a large part of horsemanship. But most of what I see, really, especially on educational videos and things, they don't really go into the details. And so people's understanding of lunging and why you do it is pretty poor in general. And I see this a lot when you people come to my clinics. And I ask them about why do they lunge and why do they use that equipment, and etc., etc. And it's clear to me that they have a very rudimentary understanding of lunging, and it's such an important thing, and can be such an important thing. So let me just start off by saying that most people's idea of lunging is putting a horse on a circle on the ground and going around and around and around. They ask for a walk, a trot and a canter. They change direction, they ask for a walk, a trot and a canter in the other way. That's it at its very basics. But in itself, that approach to lunging is not particularly useful. And I want to talk about how lunging can be used to better help a horse be a riding horse. So for my purposes, let's just start off with the idea of a circle. Lunging mostly is putting a horse on a circle, and that's what I'll demonstrate largely in these upcoming videos. But it doesn't have to be. You can lunge a horse in a triangle. You can lunge a horse in a square. You can lunge him in a rectangle or a pentagon, depending on what you want to achieve and the ability of the trainer, the person in the middle of the object, how they move and adjust their position in order to help a horse follow the feel and change directions and change angles and stuff. So it doesn't have to be. The other thing about lunging is that a lot of people don't understand that you can include objects in your lunging. So you can include trot poles, or you can lunge around an object. Other aspect of it is that people don't appreciate that lunging can be used in different ways. One of the things I notice that a lot of people do with lunging is that they put a horse out on a circle to trot. That's it. They're going to trot around, and then they might ask for a canter, and occasionally they'll get a walk. But so many horses that I see come to my clinics, horses instantly know that when they're asked to go out on a circle to be lunged, they go automatically into a trot. And later on I'll talk about the problems of this. And that relates to why do we lunge? For me, lunging has 2 major purposes. One is to help build focus in a horse. And the second one is to help build straightness in a horse, or balance. I use straightness and balance interchangeably. So to help build balance in a horse. Now, other people have different perspectives, but they're my 2 main goals when I'm lunging a horse. I want to have focus and I want to have straightness. And that's what I'm going to use to help when it comes to riding my horse. A lot of people, the way they lunge is to put a horse on a circle and go round and round and round. And in my view, that's the quickest way to teach a horse to not pay attention. It becomes mindless. And even many years ago, I was working at a facility, and I noticed that one lady would lunge her horse every day before she rode it, and she'd stand in the middle of the circle and read a book. She wasn't focusing, her horse wasn't focusing. It was just a mindless exercise. Now, I do appreciate there are other reasons to focus. Some horses aren't rideable, and so you want to give them a little exercise. The vet's told you the horse needs to be given a little work, so you'll exercise them. But there is no reason why any of that should be done poorly. It should always include some quality to it, and you should always be working on achieving better focus and greater straightness. So that's why I do it, and that's what I'll be talking about in the subsequent videos. The other thing that's quite contentious about lunging a horse is the idea of what equipment should be used. A lot of people like to have their 20-foot lunge line and put a horse out on the circle and just go round. I don't mind if that's what you want to do. I don't mind if you do it on a 6-foot lead rope. It doesn't matter, because all that can depend, well, all the quality of that, the outcome of that will depend on the person holding the rope. And if the person holding the rope knows how to get something done pretty nicely, it won't matter what the rope is, how long it is. As far as headgear goes, I generally lunge just in a rope halter because that's what I use all the time. But it makes no difference if I use a lunging cavesson, or I use a serrata, or I use a web halter, or I might use a bridle. Although I have to say I'm not a huge fan of lunging horses in bridles off the bits. And the main reason for that is that it must come much later when a horse is more educated, because if the horse gets worried and pulls away, then you'll often find that the bit will hurt the horse. And so I try to avoid lunging with bridles and bits until a horse is way further along. The other aspect about relating to their headgear that I'm not a huge fan of is gadgets. So I really discourage people using side reins, martingales, and when I was overseas I saw a lot of horses being lunged in chambons. The problem with this sort of gear is that the horse is put in a bind. He's put between a rock and a hard place. And I know a lot of people like this, using things like chambons and side reins to help a horse find his posture. But in essence, you're teaching a horse to largely bear down on the reins. And when he does come off and he feels good, there's no release, because the moment he tries to relax again, bang, he hits the end of those things. There's no feel in them that's offered to a horse. I would rather teach a horse to find his posture and how to carry himself when I ride him. That's way more important and way more relevant. And because I have the control of the reins, I can adjust the feel moment by moment to help a horse find that spot that I'm trying to encourage him to look for. But when I put some gear on him, then it's all up to him to find it and hold it. And that's pretty tough on a horse that's learning the process. So I discourage that sort of gear. Pessoas, absolutely, I hate them. And I apologize to people who love them, but I think they're anti-training for the very same reason I said. They require a horse to go in a posture and hold it and maintain it, and he doesn't get it. If he doesn't get it, he's going to struggle. There's no feel in the Pessoa. It's all up to the horse to give, because the Pessoa will never give. So that's my take on the use of using gear. The other thing I want to say, that just before we finish on this part of the series, when a horse is learning to lunge, I don't like using round yards. I don't like using round yards because they become a factor in keeping a horse confined. If the round yard is necessary because you have a horse who's got a strong habit of pulling away and bolting off at the end of the rope and you can't hold him, then a round yard can be useful. But from that, if that's not the case, if you've just got a horse that's heavy on the rope, or it isn't straight, using a round yard becomes a crutch. And a horse never learns to follow the feel that the person is offering with the rope or in their position, their posture or their energy. It all becomes about the wall of the round yard confining them into a space, but it doesn't help a horse learn to follow the feel and have his thoughts on what the person is presenting. So I discourage it. It's not that it can't work. It's not that it can't, horses can't learn to lunge brilliantly when they're starting off in a round yard. It's not that it can't, but I feel it's another hindrance that just makes the job of helping my horse follow my feel a little bit harder. But that's my personal preference. Others would argue with that. The other thing I like to mention is about whether you use a rope or a lunging whip or a flag or nothing to help a horse move out. And in my mind, it doesn't matter. It's all in how it's used, and that's the key thing here. If that is in the control of the person and the person knows what they're doing, that equipment is irrelevant. Which equipment you use is not irrelevant, because a good horseman will constantly adjust what he uses and how he uses it for each particular horse in each particular moment. So don't get tied up in knots about that stuff. Same thing as I don't get tied up in knots about which headgear you use, because it's all up to the person doing the training as to how the outcome works out. Now, in the next video, I want to talk about how to get a horse started on the circle, and we'll be talking about the difference in driving and directing. If you haven't already seen my video on driving and directing, I recommend you look at that, and I'll put a link below on that. But in the next video, I'm going to talk about how it applies, how you get it to direct a horse's thought to go out on the circle, and how you get a horse's thought to follow a feel in changing gaits or changing speed within the gait, and also in changing direction. Later on, I'm going to be talking more specifically about the way that I can use lunging to help a horse achieve greater focus. And then finally, at another video, I'll be talking about the sorts of approaches I might take to help a horse improve their straightness. So I know this has been a rambling sort of video, but I hope you'll stick with it and follow up with the next videos, because I think you'll find them more interesting. Until then, good night, Alice, wherever you are.